Hey there guys, how are we doing? I'm Glenn and this, my friends, is the Beardyman Craft Beer channel. Thanks very much for joining me on another homebrew / food episode. I hope you guys are keeping well. So what have I been up to since my last brew day video with Shamik last year? Not a whole lot, to be honest. It's pretty much been lockdown after lockdown here in Ireland. However, that said, I did get to brew a few beers for December / Christmas. And one of those, which will feature throughout today's video, is this. This is my Bourbon Imperial Stout, and it's delicious. I will share the recipe. I had a beer a couple of years ago from a fantastic brewery here in Ireland called Larkin's, and the Bourbon Imperial Stout is called Morrigan. And I absolutely loved it. And I remember going away thinking, okay, I want to make something like this. This isn't the recipe, but it is a Bourbon Imperial Stout. I used 1 kg of dark candy sugar. I used bourbon chips, still spirits bourbon chips. I made up a tincture of 50 grams of bourbon chips mixed in with 100 milliliters of bourbon in a jar, put it in the fridge, closed it tight for about a week, and then I poured all of that into the secondary fermenter, and that's worked really well. Some might think, okay, 50 grams of bourbon chips for this, which was, I think it's a 21 litre batch, it worked out really well. It's not too powerful, the bourbon, it's subtle enough, and it suits my palate down to the ground. And then the other thing that I did with this beer was a suggestion from my friend Derek, which was to use Voss Kveik yeast. And that is an absolute workhorse of a yeast. It's the first time I've used it, and it certainly won't be the last time. This beer pretty much fermented in about 3 to 4 days. I used the grain fodder conical fermenter, and I fermented it at about 35 degrees Celsius, and it just it bubbled away. It was so awesome just to watch it doing its thing. Then it was done. So once it was fermented, I was able then to add the chips, the bourbon chips to the beer into secondary. I basically poured everything into a hop net and captured or caught the chips in the hop net and just left everything for another 5 to 7 days. So not only did I keg this beer, I also bottled a few and put them away for maybe 6 to 12 months to see how it compares to the current version of this beer in the keg. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm also using this beer as an ingredient into food recipes. Stick with me. Now, I'm not a chef, I'm not a cook, I'm not trying to be a chef, I'm not trying to be a cook, but it's very easy to also use what you've brewed in some recipes. And I've been using my craft beer and I've been using my homebrew in lots of things that I cook here at home. The first one that I'm about to show you is my Bourbon Imperial Stout beer bread. This is absolutely delicious. Now, you don't have to use Bourbon Imperial Stout. You can use any beer in a beer bread. You can use hoppy beers, you can use stouts, you can use whatever you like, but this recipe uses Bourbon Imperial Stout. The second recipe, which I'd like to share with you, is my Bourbon Imperial Stout bean burgers. These are absolutely delicious, and again, really easy to make. Enjoy this, guys. Okay guys, so we want to sieve out that flour, and then we can add our 1/4 cup of sugar. Give that a bit of a mix around. Add in our delicious Bourbon Imperial Stout. Remember, you can use any stout for this or any hoppy beer, guys. Every time you do, it'll give it a different taste. Just make sure the consistency is mixed well enough that it has that doughy consistency. Take a rectangular baking tin and grease up all sides then with some butter. We can then slowly pour in our Bourbon Imperial Stout bread mix. Give the tin a little bit of a shake to get it into the corners. Take our melted butter and pour it in all over the top. It's going to give it that beautiful crunch when it comes out of the oven. Then slap it in the oven for an hour at 190 degrees Celsius or 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The beer bread should be super crunchy on the outside, sweet and moist on the inside, and 100% delish. Whip on our gas, add some oil to a frying pan, add our onions. We can fry these up for a couple of minutes just to get them translucent. Giving that a good shake before I add in the garlic. Just give them a whiz around in the pan. Next, we take a bowl, we add our mixed beans, and depending on how you like bean burgers, whether you crush them slightly, mash them, completely up to how well you like your crushed beans. I'm just going to give them a bit of a crush and then use a fork and just mash them. I want them kind of gnarly-ish. Now guys, it's always a good idea if you're cooking with beer to have a glass of beer next to you. Delicious. Next, we want to add our sweet corn, and again, depending on how you like your burgers, whether you crush them down completely or just crush some of them. I'm just going to crush a few of them, mix them in, and then just crush them down with a fork. Add our fried onions and our garlic from earlier on. Giving that a little bit of a mix around. Then we can add in our ground cumin and our cayenne pepper. Give that a mix around again. We will then shortly add our Bourbon Imperial Stout. This is going to make the mixture quite wet, and that's where the flour will come in shortly. So we'll mix that through. Add in our flour bit by bit, don't add it all together. Giving that a mix all of that in. Add it in a couple of stages. And that should bind the mix together for our burgers. So I've decided to cheat a little. I'm going to use a burger press. We'll add in our bean burger mix. Pack it in. It's very kind of gloopy and sticky at this point. pack it all in. Of course you can put these together by hand, but I'm going to cheat and use this bad boy and give it a good press down. Okay, so I'm going to take that burger out off camera onto some brown paper. Oil in the pan, heat that bad boy up again. Add our burger and let that sizzle on each side for a couple of minutes. Just making sure that it's staying compacted. These tend to break up very easily, so just be careful and mindful of that. Medium heat. It smells lovely. Okay, so I flip that over and that's browned very nicely on one side. Taking my time now with the other side. Give it a bit of a shaking around so it doesn't stick. Okay, so I've whipped off the heat. I can now prep my brioche buns with some mixed leaf salad. Take my bean burger and place that nicely on top. Now for this I'm going to chop up some cherry tomatoes. I love cherry tomatoes. We'll then add a dollop of mayonnaise. And we'll also add some ketchup. Take some of our cherry tomatoes and place them around the top. Yeah, that does look tasty. So there we go, guys. Two fairly simple but two tasty food recipes where we get to use either our own homebrew or craft beer of your choice. If you have the time, if you have the ingredients, do give them a go and tell me how you get on. Now, before I go, one other thing that I wanted to share is this magazine, which I signed up to quite some time ago. This is the Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, and I highly recommend it. I'll put the link down below. I think they're doing some offers at the moment. It's great to kind of keep up with the upcoming and current trends when it comes to craft beer and brewing. So one, I highly recommend this magazine. Guys, thanks very much for joining me on another homebrew episode. In my next episode, I will be brewing, and we'll put aside the food recipes. I will be brewing. I'm thinking of brewing a rye red, or maybe something using rye. I haven't really decided, but my next episode will be a brew day episode on the grain fodder, the G30. Guys, thanks very much for joining me, and remember, if you like the videos, give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Hit that subscribe button. Cheers.